The journey from bronze to grand champ took me about a year. And today I want to go through each rank and share with you every major mechanic and tip that helped me get from one rank to the next. Well, that's pretty much all we do on this channel actually, but let's see if we can summarize my personal journey in one video. Before we get started, let's take a second to smack that beautiful like button. It doesn't cost you anything and it only takes 2 seconds. So let's get that out of the way first and we can get into the video. Let's start with a timetable to answer everyone's favorite question.
I hit Grand Platinum in 50 hours. Is that good or bad?
The truth is, it doesn't really matter. Different people improve at different rates, but here's how long it took me to hit each rank to give you a general idea. At the beginning, I started in silver and it took me about a week and a half to hit gold, and another week to hit platinum. Then it took me a good 3 weeks to get all the way up to diamond, and from there it took me a total of 3 months to go from silver to champ in 2v2s. And here's where I ran into a lot of pitfalls in my progress, which we will go over, so hopefully you can avoid them as well. And at this point, it took me roughly 9 months to go from champ 1 all the way to grand champ, totaling up 1 year. Let's get into breaking down what I used to get out of each individual rank. So I wasn't in bronze for long. I think I only fell in and out from silver once or twice. So the only tip I have for you is to try to focus on making sure your hits are at least going towards the opponent's side. Simple, right? The thing is, I noticed I was getting tempted to hit the ball every time I was close to it. Even if it was rolling towards my own goal, I just wanted to touch it. Meaning this hit was usually bad for my team. I remember being able to rank up if I just took a little bit of extra time to get around the ball, and if I'm gonna hit it, at least hit it towards the correct side. It's not much for a strategy, but any semblance of a strategy should be able to get you into. Ironically, I felt like I learned a lot in silver, despite being a lower rank. I started dabbling in pretty much a little bit of everything, but there were 3 main things that really stood out to me that helped me out the most. Starting with how to hit the ball harder and getting some height on my hits. To do this, I jump and flip through balls that were bouncing, and for grounded ones, I simply drove into them with some boost. Learning this, I started doing this drill every day where I would go into free play, I just hit the ball as hard as I can towards the wall and then get back and then keep booming the ball back and to myself over and over and see how many volleys I can keep up. It's kind of like when tennis players practice using a wall. This helped so much because if you can just boom that ball consistently towards the opposing side, your opponents will eventually miss and you can just kind of roll the ball in. Bringing us to the next mechanic, basic dribbling. Being able to roll the ball into the goal was something I had to learn. So here I started learning the basics of dribbling. Nothing fancy, but I was at least able to roll the ball to the goal from any location, which helped me capitalize on those free goals. All I did was get into free play and I started rolling the ball on the ground along the boost pads or along the outside, just kind of give a goal to myself to get the ball from point A to Z. Next was shadow defense. Don't get it twisted, I was horrible at shadow defense. If I actually had to make a shadow save, that shot is definitely going in. But before learning about shadowing, whenever I'm on defense, I thought that I had to choose between either challenging straight up or going all the way back to play goalie. Simply attempting the shadow gave me a third option to put pressure in this midfield region and stall for time when I needed to. And honestly, at this rank, if you just put on any level of pressure or simply drive in front of them, they're probably gonna miss the shot trying to get it around you. So it's okay that I probably would have missed the save. And that was pretty much it. Adding a little bit to my abysmal defense and capitalizing on free goals got me into. Gold is the rank where you remotely have some semblance of knowing what you're doing. This was the rank where I started to feel almost like all the hours I put into practicing were actually kind of starting to pay off. And up until now, I've been practicing a decent amount of ground game and a okay amount of aerials, but Rocket League has a very important third element, which is the wall. You don't need to be as effective on the wall in these ranks, but if you can at least touch the ball consistently, that is enough. And the biggest tip I received here was to stop using as much boost the moment I hit the lip as I'm on the way up the wall. Because once you're on the wall, you're going to want to go a little bit slower. This is super helpful of making sure the ball stays in front of you, because even if the ball went to the wall super fast, eventually gravity and friction is going to take its toll and the ball is going to start slowing down. And if you go too fast, you're going to end up having awkward moments like this where you go under the ball or past the ball. Slow down and try practicing without using too much boost and get those consistent wall touches. Gold was also where I got my first coaching session, and the biggest takeaway from that was possession. If you're in a situation where both players are rotating back, if you boom the ball to their side of the field, you're essentially just passing it to the opponents. So an easy rule I kind of followed was that if I'm going to boom a clear, I should at least get it over one opponent. But banging a clear over no one just meant I was passing it, and was something I was actively starting to try to avoid. which means I also had to learn how to dribble. I started practicing the carry dribble and other forms of dribbling like the bounce dribble. I wasn't good enough to do anything crazy, but being able to carry it for a little bit and then flick or simply slipping under it and then doing a diagonal flick right away was usually enough, and practicing dribbling now will help you get ready by the time you need it in the higher ranks. It's a skill that takes a lot of time to cultivate, so you might as well start practicing early. And finally, before leaving gold, I started practicing my aerial car control. I wasn't able to consistently hit anything too high or difficult in matches, but I did start practicing it now because you're gonna need it in... So, Platinum and Diamond. Those ranks were kind of a blur. I learned a lot somewhere around mid-Platinum, and those tips basically just carried me to High Diamond and Champ, so I'm gonna go ahead and combine these two ranks here. At this point, you should be relatively familiar with all the fundamental mechanics of the game. Aerials, power shots, etc. You don't have to be good at them, but you have to be aware of them and start kind of working on practicing them. Nothing advanced like air dribbles or ceiling shots yet, you have more important things to work on, but you should be relatively proficient at hitting all the basics in training. One thing I noticed was even though I could hit these things in training, I kept missing them in matches all the time. Was it a lack of practice? Was it nerves? No, actually it was my positioning, and we've seen this so often in our replay analysis streams. Players missing saves like these, but if they're positioned, say, here, I mean anyone can hit that, you just jump right at it. So I started approaching the game with the mentality that instead of having good mechanics to hit difficult shots, I wanted to have good positioning to make any shot easy. This was way more consistent and brings us to far post rotations. I've talked way too much about far post rotations in basically every other video already, so I won't go over it again here. I'll have a tutorial linked down below. But it was so essential in helping me get more consistent hits because it helps you go towards the ball directly instead of trying to hit it from weird angles. I thought this was the best tip in Rocket League, and I stand by it. Most players I coach that are trying to break into the higher ranks usually are making the mistake of not rotating far post consistently. Next was understanding offensive positioning better. Staying further back and seeing what's about to happen before making any decisions was huge. Having free passes fly over my head or being way too far to hit an easy pass sucked. So I generalized my positioning into 3 main offense spots. If my teammate is bringing the ball around this corner, for example, I'll be somewhere on the midfield line on the same side if I think my opponents are going to clear it, so I can easily push the ball back into the play. If there's only one defender or the opposing team is rotating poorly, I like to sit a little bit past the midfield and on the far post side. Being on the far post side will give you a chance to hit any successful passes. And finally, if I'm not 100% sure what's happening, I like to just troll this midfield region pretty much where the ball spawns. It's a great jack of all trades position that will let you capitalize on free goals and be far back enough in case things go wrong. I made this my default go-to spot, and then I would pick one of the other 2 positions based on what's happening. Continuing to practice and training my fundamentals and keeping these tips in mind got me to Diamond 3, and I was stuck here for a little bit before getting into Champ 1. I was able to finally hit Champ 1 when I started playing around my teammates better, especially if my teammate was ball chasing. I had to learn to be okay with just letting them chase and playing a good bit behind them and just playing off their 50s, because if they win the 50, great, and if they lose, since I'm hanging a good distance behind them already, I get to take possession and prevent the opponents from getting a free goal. Mechanically, I realized I was worrying way too much about being able to hit certain shots or working on specific mechanics that I totally overlooked one of the biggest fundamentals, recovery. When working on dribbling faster or flying the aerials quicker, you're working on your speed on the front end, and I completely overlooked improving my speed when it came to getting back into the play. So I started trying to land on walls with my nose facing down instead of simply allowing myself to crash into it. I also started working on wave dashing every time I jumped off the wall, and as well as using my power slide a lot more, and flip canceling whenever I could. I saw huge improvements in my game speed overall by improving my recovery, which was able to finally help me get into Champ 1. As I mentioned in the intro, this is where it took me over half a year to climb the GC, and one of the biggest mistakes I made was focusing too much on playing my main game mode, 2v2s. I played a decent amount of 1s, I never played 3s. If I was an RPG character, my stats would look something like this, where I'm okay on the ground, but I could basically never hit a ball when it's in the air. And at this point, you really want to try to become a more well-rounded player. 1v1s promote consistency and ground play, while 2v2s have punishing and strict rotations, as well as a bit of everything mechanically. But 3v3s is where you start to rotate more dynamically, as well as improve your aerial gameplay. So whichever mode you're not comfortable with, you need to play that more. So for me, I had to force myself to focus on 3s more for a while. And that really helped my aerial play and positioning myself a bit more dynamically based on the information from the field instead of always rotating the same textbook way. And playing even more 1v1s was a huge boost in my mechanics and consistency. 1v1s was great at exposing the things that I was horrible at. Then outside of broadening my playstyle and skills, I focused a lot more on my boost management and started using wall camping to push into In Champ 2, my mechanics continued to grow and I really started practicing everything I could get my hands on, even things I didn't really need. I feel like C2 was one of the hardest ranks to figure out what you're doing wrong, and I was stuck here for a pretty long time. As I mentioned in the previous rank, I started diving into other game modes, and 1v1s was great at exposing my bad mechanics, which was mostly defense. I needed to tighten up my shadow defense because I kept getting put into weird spots where it's super hard to shadow, and then a coach of mine at the time told me that I needed to shadow more consistently on the side to make sure you're not directly under the ball. When you go up and fake and turn into a shadow position, try to stay on the outside, further away from the goal in your opponent, so that you only have to drive in one direction when saving any shot. Especially when you fake and shadow closer to their half of the field, you can stay further back and on the outside to easily save and bring the ball to your corner. But this can put you in a weird spot if you're too close to your own net. So if I'm not going to go in from a fake and if I'm pretty close to my own net, I like to take a closer position on the inside instead. This can help cut off the far post and limit their shot to the near post side for an easy save. Improving my shadow defense was essential in helping me bring the ball to my own corners and then taking possession. This also applies to regular saves as well. I started trying to make sure any save I do brings the ball to the corner so I don't just get scored on in the long run anyways, especially in 2s or 3s. If none of my teammates were behind me, shadowing helped so much in stalling for time so you can challenge safely. And those improvements to my defense was able to help me get to the jump from Champ 3 to GC was tough. This is where you need to start to min-max everything and start squeezing out extra performance wherever you can. Everything I learned up till now, I had to continue doing, but simply do it better and more consistently. So identifying mistakes was key. I started watching my replays more than ever in this rank, and then I would watch it from my teammate's perspective to see when I was being a crappy teammate, and then also from my opponent's perspective to see when I was being clearly not a threat and to find holes in my own offense and defense. Mechanically, the biggest thing to work on here was redirects and passing. In my 1v1 video with NightRdyer, we talked about the advantages of shooting closer to the opponent's net. So practicing your power shots and taking this in mind will help you score a lot more. And going back to passing, in 2s and 3s, a pass is going to be the easiest way to bring the origin of a shot as close as possible to their goal. For ways to practice passing, I've talked about it in the GC section of my mechanics video, and for both the videos I'm referencing, I'll have links in the description below. I am planning a full in-depth guide on advanced passing soon, so subscribe with that notification bell on if you don't want to miss it. Passing is too big of a topic for me to cover in this video, so please be patient for that if you're interested, but I did want to highlight its importance in helping me get to GC. C3 is the rank where you'll still probably get some inconsistent or straight up bad teammates, but you being the best teammate you can be is how you can bring the best out of your team as a whole. And consistently working on those mechanics and finding ways to be a better teammate through solid passing and defense is going to be the fastest way to make the jump into Grand Champion. And here we are. In total, it took me pretty much about a year, and the same month I finally hit GC was the same month I hit 1,000 subscribers. It was a lot of fun for me to revisit my old footage and think back on my progress as both a player and a content creator. I hope you guys found this helpful and entertaining. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.